What's up? What's up? What's up? This is Koski of Fun Day back at it once again. And we are kicking in, part two of Liberation Movements in Southern Africa by Nathan Shamyurira, University of Dar-es-Salaam, Tanzania. This one we're gonna do on Namibia. We're gonna, we're gonna talk a little bit more about Namibia because it was a liberation movement going all around. So this is what we're doing. Before we get into this, a good shout out to my ancestors for giving me the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And then also I'll give a shout out to y'all for, looking, the watching, whatever the clickbait, however you got here, you know what I'm saying? So we're gonna go through this right quick. Cause this gotta be told, you know what I'm saying? All right, a lot of things is going on. We gotta, discuss in the last video about how Henry Kissinger came down and had Ann Smith policy of Kilton Ken, the domino theory, and we didn't talk about that so much, but they had a domino theory about Southern Africa, and also the South African exchange, where the South African industrialists was to run everything in Southern Africa. So neo-colonialism and new imperialism on the side of that. And we also listened to the OAU response and how they came up with a policy called talking versus killing. So here we go. We're going to get to Namibia and the rise of the worker student conscious. The social and economic conditions of Namibian workers are far worse than those of South Africans. Namibia is exploited perhaps more than any other South African country, both by South African and international, especially by American and German capital. The country's major economic activity, mining, is completely controlled by Germany, Britain, the United States, and South Africa. And its second major economic activity, fishing, is owned and managed by 9 South African companies. Most of Namibia itself is a desert where a few herdsmen eke out a miserable existence. Anxious to guarantee a continuous labor supply to the foreign-owned mining, fishing, and agricultural companies in Namibia, the South African government has instituted a system of contract labor that forces or induces Namibians to leave their traditional village and work for very low wages. The surplus capital generated by such cheap contract labor is a major factor that makes Namibia, South Africa, and the Rhodesian mines highly profitable and competitive. The use of migrant or contract labor is the single most distinctive feature of Southern African socio-economic life. Since the beginning of this century, workers have been moved for miles from neighboring states to South African gold mines and farms. Labor recruitment continues even to this day in radical anti-imperialist countries as Mozambique. An estimated 1 million migrant workers in South Africa alone. Because of the frigid system of apartheid, much black labor force already living in South Africa is self-migrant, drawn to the reserves, now given the modern name Bustanistan. The Bustanistan are nothing more than a reserve labor army of South African industrial system. The white regime can draw upon these armies when it takes their likes and throw workers back into the Bustanistan to fend for themselves when they are no longer needed. The situation requires the industry such as the built-in labor costs as insurance, pension, old age benefits, and adequate social indemnities. In the 1970s, 2 other significant developments have swelled the ranks of these migrant workers. The first is the population explosion. In Zimbabwe, for example, the annual percentage of population increase reached 4% in 1972 and continued to rise. Since 1972, the number of babies born to the 6.5 million Africans in the country each year has equaled the entire white population of 270,000 persons. In 1971, Smith called for at least 1 baby from each white family, but the birth rate in a beleaguered society has continued to fall. The second development of political importance is the number of blacks who completed primary and secondary schooling and are pointing to the job market that has neither the jobs nor the bare social amenities to offer them. The number of educated job workers is growing each year. And this large body of unemployed workers and youth who brought about the Great Namibian General Strike in 1972 and the SWAPO and Langa uprising in South Africa in 1976. Studies indicate the majority of participants involved in liberation struggles through Southern Africa are migrant workers and students. Migrant workers are those who have some work experience on white-owned farms or in the city and thus have experienced exploitation, but at the same time kept their roots in the traditional economy. These persons who oscillate between city and village, depending on both of their existence over long periods of time, are the backbone of the wars of liberation. This oscillation is an integral part of the colonial capitalist system that has developed in Southern Africa. Over the years, it has undermined the peasant economy and established migrant workers as a reserve army of labor. Student participation in the liberation struggle is comparatively a new phenomenon of the 1970s. But as school dropouts have swelled the ranks of the unemployed, those in school have seen little point in continuing their studies. The general strike of Namibian workers in 1972 marked differently a previous activities because of the intensity of the organization and the secrecy observed. The workers were organized as the factory-based cell, apparently by SWAPO, which revealed plans for the strike to the OAU Liberation Committee in 1971. There was evidence for a strong organization in the segregated residential areas of Windhoek, especially after the strike had started. While workers officially went on strike and demanded higher wages to the end of the industrial system of contract labor, the message was really a political one. In effect, it demanded national independence and an end to the direct colonialism of South Africa. At long last, the message of Dar-es-Salaam and the labor-based liberation movements was reaching the people by radio, printed literature, and training political organizers and fighters. Unlike the general strikes attempted in the 1960s, the 1972 Namibian strike had clear objectives. Motivation was maintained by a string of tightly organized factory-based cells and reinforced by 10 house units in segregated residential areas. For the first time in history, the labor movement in Namibia and South Africa, foreign migrants and indigenous workers joined hands to stop work for a common cause. The strikers refused to identify their leaders and assist in negotiating as a group. The police thus could not arrest the leaders as a prelude to breaking the strike. What was significant about the strike, besides the intensity of this organization, was the heightened level of consciousness among the South African and Black Namibian workers. This formed the basis for the uprising of Soweto and Langa in 1976. In Soweto, for example, the African Student Movement and the Parents Association organized protests in the tightly knit base house units. As the 1972 strike had indicated, SWAPO had managed to organize both internal and external organizations in Namibia. SWAPO spokesman says that theirs is not a political party, but a broad movement encompassing all stratas of society. Only ultimately, when Namibia is free and independent, do they hope to form a political party as Frelimo has in Mozambique. Ideologically, SWAPO is right to insist on a broad movement at the present stage. The revolution is going through a national democratic phase, encompassing all social groups and classes in society that are opposed to the common enemy of the Namibian people. Thus, unity on a broad front at this stage is essential. In Namibia, a number of significant social groups have remained outside of SWAPO, although there is an attempt at unity under the short-lived Namibian People's Convention. SWAPO has encountered difficulty because of its leadership has not been entirely progressive or committed to the socialist revolution. To prevent a revolution from being derailed by conservative forces, Chairman Mao Zedong stressed that the leadership in a broad movement must remain in the hands of the ideologically advanced elements. This has not been the case with SWAPO. In spite of this limitation, which has considerable attention within SWAPO, the movements have carried the ideology of freedom and revolutionary change to the masses in Namibia. In the journal Namibia Today, and in petitions to the UN Council of Namibia, SWAPO has been exposed the aggressive nature of the South African regime. More importantly, by recruiting and infiltrating guerrillas into Namibia, under very difficult conditions, it has mobilized the people and raised their level of consciousness. SWAPO believed, as did Che Guevara, that armed struggle itself is a vast school for teaching the people about their rights, teaching the leaders about the moments of their duty, and instructing all people about the nation and the system. When bombs drop and kill people, individuals examine the broken pieces and see that the bomb was made in Germany, France, America, or South Africa, and in that way identify the enemy. When needed medicine, food, and weapons arrive from Dar-es-Salaam, Rwanda, or Motopo, the friend has identified himself. Liberation strategy of the frontline states. The diplomatic work of the OAU in Southern Africa has been undertaken by 5 frontline states: Tanzania, Zambia, Botswana, Mozambique, and Angola. The OAU Liberation Committee is headquartered in Dar-es-Salaam, and all except Botswana maintain offices and camps for liberation movements. Among other things, frontline states have made a big effort to unite liberation movements of Zimbabwe and also try to promote the Geneva Convention Constitutional Conference. As a result of this movement, the frontline states have been called an imperialist network and face contradictions within their own societies. All frontline states have severe economic problems in the last 3 years, brought about by a severe drought of 1973-1974, rising prices, oil inflation, and a need to import large quantities of food. Pause right there. Now, you in Southern Africa, one of the richest lands in the world. You know what I'm saying? And you need to import large quantities of food. You know what I'm saying? That right there is neocolonialism, imperialism. You know, you got all this fertile land around you. You need to import food. That's sickening. You know what I'm saying? Sidebar back in. Zaire started with a huge national debt. Zambia was hit by a sharp drop in the prices of copper, difficulties of transporting goods in and out the country on the Belangro railways, and the Tanzanian railway to Dar-es-Salaam after the Rhodesia border closed in 1973, and continuing poor agricultural yields. Because of these economic difficulties, Zaire and Zambia accepted South African loan and aid, as well as increased American aid. For this reason, perhaps, the policy of these two governments were heavily influenced by the South African position throughout the Angolan crisis. Although Tanzania and Botswana had similar economic problems, and also have received increased American aid, they refused South African aid, and their position on Angola has been firmly anti-imperialist. The liberation strategy of the frontline states stemmed directly from the Iskosi Manifesto of 1969, which we have a video on, sidebar, which we have a video on this page, which clearly states that we prefer to negotiate rather than destroy, to talk rather than kill. So they gave the option. They said, we rather negotiate rather than destroy. We rather talk rather than kill. Armed struggle is supported only if the main strategy of the constitution negotiations is denied by the action of those present in the power of Southern Africa. Even in the Dar-es-Salaam Declaration of 1974, armed struggle is endorsed as a tactic in Zimbabwe and Namibia, but not in South Africa. For the latter, South Africa, the declaration states, Africa's responsibility is clear. We must ostracize and urge the rest of the world to ostracize the South African regime at present organized. Africa must maintain economic, political, and cultural boycott of South Africa. The OAU and the UN must work in concert for the extension of the boycott. So that was their statement on the OAU statement. They was not going to have armed resistance in South Africa. Although it's known these boycotts have never been really effective in dealing with a network of international capitalism and multilateral imperialism, Support for liberation movement in South Africa is mentioned only in passing in the declaration after the boycott strategy has been discussed. Angola provided the litmus test for the Linguista Manifesto. Intervention in South Africa clearly shows that it wanted to surround itself with Palestinians or regimes that would willingly accept its homogeny. That is precisely the purpose behind the Turner Hill talks going on in Namibia and the thrust of South African interests in Zimbabwe. Smith canceled his behavior at Geneva, followed by the move to set up a puppet organization of traditional chiefs which would negotiate an internal settlement with him, has had the full backing of South Africa. 40 South African helicopters were drawn from Zimbabwe before the Geneva conference, and the oil cuts have been often restored and now being used to attack the Zanu guerrilla camps in Mozambique. As already stressed, the white minority regimes will not transfer power peacefully if such transfer threaten their vital interests or change their social order. The experience in Angola has shown that Africa preoccupation with unity among liberation movements is counterproductive. Let me read this again. The experience in Angola also showed that Africa's preoccupation with unity among liberation movements is counterproductive. A national government made up of 3 liberation movements of Angola just could not work. Unity between a socialist-oriented party and any puppet movement financed by the CIA will have no basis for success. Unity can only be achieved between movements that have similar ideologies and common objectives. And there you have it. As we looked at, Namibia and Angola, we'll go a little bit deeper into Angola, that how the workers, because of that labor force and the workers and stuff like that, I made in cadre a sort of leadership in dealing with that because they all been impressed with the same common interests, And so they came in, the OAU came on in and built it on up through cadre and stuff like that. And also give out leaflets and pamphlets to have a conscious, organized group. You know what I'm saying? First, you got to get the conscience together, then the organization comes through. But also right here, as you know, the OAU, as I said, they wasn't going to touch South Africa, but they could touch everything around South Africa. And their strategy for the Louis Conference manifesto was we rather negotiate than destroy, to talk than rather kill. If the shoe was on the other foot, it wouldn't happen like that for them. But, that was the strategy, to keep everything tampered down. And like I said before, they wasn't giving it up without a fight. They was not giving that up without a fight. So the strategy, part of it didn't work, but, it still got free somewhat. I ain't gonna say somewhat. There's still some crazy stuff going on in Namibia. The Germans still own their private property and stuff like France, America, South Africa too. You know what I'm saying? Angola, they had the richest woman in the world. I guess who became president after this? The daughter of the president of this person that came, took over Angola. And now she on the wanted list. They are trying to get her. And she's the richest black woman in the world, To prevent a revolution from being derailed by conservative forces, Chairman Mao Zedong stressed that leadership in a broad movement must remain in the hands of the ideologically advanced. That's what we got to remain in the hands of the ideologically advanced about what's going on. SWAPO believed, as Che Guevara, that armed struggle itself is a vast school for teaching people about their rights, teaching the leaders of the movement about their duties, and instructing all people about their new nation and system. And that's what we're going to leave on that note. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a very important thing. That's a very important statement right there and moving in action. Anyway, this is a close gift Sunday. Saying much love to you and yours. Hope you enjoyed the video. We dropping black knowledge like this in the series. Much love. Hope you enjoyed it. And catch you on the next one. Peace.